Okay, are we ready to get started? Look what's happening today. In the market, almost a 3% in one day drop. China, trade wars, the craziest things going on I've ever seen in my whole life. All of that's putting pressure on the market. So I just thought I'd bring that up. It was overheating anyway. Let's see, where do I want to start today? Where do we want to start?
I think we have a little bit of time.
Ready? Here we go. A company has a tool crib and it's trying to hire someone to distribute out of this tool crib to the employees when they walk up, when they need something. They have to sign it out, or they have to, everything's accounted for. So they have to decide who to hire. Looks like George or John. Right, so you've got to put yourself in the management position, and I did a lot of hiring, and one thing I changed at the company I was working with that I did differently than any of the other managers is when I was hiring somebody, I went through the traditional, you take the stack of resumes, you separate them into two piles, the maybe interview and the ones there's no way. And then you hand over the ones no way, and somebody typed up the letter, sorry, your resume was not selected for interview. Then you go through the ones you want to interview and you try to pinpoint so you don't interview 100 people. I get it down to, I can't remember, it's been so many years, 15 maybe, 20. Start interviewing 15, 20. When I get it down, then I go with second interviews. And then when I get to second or third interview, the interview then does not become such a traditional interview. A traditional interview is when, as a manager, you're asking questions, scenarios, background, to get answers, to get a feel for the person, to see if this would be a good fit for your team, as well as do they have the ability to learn quickly, could they do the duties without making mistakes all the time, all these type of things. So what I incorporated is in that last interview, when I got it down to 2 people, I would do something like this, not quite just like this, but something like this. I would always say, I can remember specifically hiring somebody for accounts receivable or payable? I think it was receivable. And part of the job was where you had to do these certain journal entries, and you had to know we had this really weird computer system. Back then, it was even before personal computers were really out there. And so you had to enter the journal entry of what you were making. You had to do a calculation, because we were receiving funds from the federal government, and you had to calculate how much needed to be returned based on a scenario. And this whole calculation's done, and then you write the journal entry, and then you enter the journal entry into the system. So it gets applied. And then the check gets generated and so on. What I will always do when I get it down to the last 2 people is I would say, we're in the interview, and right towards the end of the interview, I go, hey, let me show you something that is part of the duties. And they wouldn't know what's coming. And I'd say, you have to do this calculation. Here's an example. Here's how you calculate it. Then you take your results of the calculation, you do your debit and credit journal entry. Here it is. And then get on the system, and you have to enter this into the system. Here's the menu, here's the selection, and I'd go kind of fast, but not too fast. I could tell if they were paying attention or not paying attention. Then after I got done, I would go, okay, here's a scenario similar. Show me what you calculate, show me your debit and credit, show me how you would enter this on the computer. And to see how quickly they picked up on what I just taught them. Because that was a big part of the job, is how fast they can become productive. A company always loses money when they first hire somebody for a specific job that they've never done before because of the time it takes to get that person up to productivity. So you're losing money. You're making an investment on the employee. So I always said, the faster I could get somebody to be productive, the faster we can get a return on our investment. And then it's a matter of making sure they stick around long enough to get that true return on investment. Second person, same thing. I would then say, okay, now you show me. And it would become very clear who would be your best candidate when you got down to where you're showing them how to do something and having them do it. Not just ask questions and hear the answers. Because almost everybody tries their best to walk in an interview on the end that's being interviewed and coming up with what they feel are the best answers that the person they're interviewing them want to hear. Everybody know what I'm talking about? It's like, you know, if you're on the end of the interview being interviewed, you're like, what would be the perfect answer here? Instead of just, you know, just talking, it would be, what's the answer would be best for the person who's doing this interview? So, my future managers, when you're in a job and you get to the point to where you're hiring people, please try to consider a way to see if you're truly hiring the right person that's other than just asking questions and getting answers. Put something together when you get it down to the last two. So in this case, these last two people in this scenario, they're handing out tools and we're trying to figure out which one to hire. And one is only going to cost, you tell how old this question is, one's only going to cost $8 an hour. And you're going, wow, look how much money we could save the company. Because if I hire John, he's going to be 12 bucks an hour. It's a lot more expensive. But when they're ran through the test, here's how you're going to do what you do. Here's how you keep track of what you just had checked out. Here's how you dispose of it, and then here's how it gets returned, check it in. And we want you now to start helping employees as they come up to check out of this tool bin. Help them. Let's see you do it. And we're going to time you. And so George, where was his rate? He averaged 4 minutes per employee coming up to check something out. There's the rate. Took 4 minutes on average. Maybe we let him go for an hour or two. You know, once we felt he caught on. John was a little more experienced, a little more of a veteran, which is why it's going to be more expensive to get John to take this job. And his average was 3 minutes after a few hours of doing it. So John was a little faster than George, but he's more expensive. So you're at that point now where you go, well, who do I hire? Because yes, one's more expensive, but one's faster, one's slower, but they're far less expensive. How do I come out ahead? The hard part is coming up with what would be the waiting cost. What if one of them fall behind, as it happens certain times of the year, they get so busy with so many employees needing things that they could fall behind, and we start having waiting taking place. How does that affect production? How does that affect whatever their job is? And now that's a hard thing to come up with, and that's a whole other subject, but for this class, you're given that cost. So just go with that assumption you're going to be given, but you put in the time to figure it out too, in real life. $12 an hour. Our waiting cost is per hour. So we need to now have our arrivals per hour and our service per hour, and we got to turn them into rates, not time. Everybody hear that? That's the part where everybody gets confused on a quiz. If you're given the arrival or the service in time, you've got to convert it to a rate. How many instead of how long? We're being told a time on the service for both of them. We've got to convert that to how many. But in this last sentence, or the second to last sentence, where is it? Oh, I'm sorry. The waiting cost is $10, not $12. I missed the number there. The last sentence is our arrival rate. No matter who's working, the employees are showing up to the tool crib at an arrival rate of 12 per hour. So there's our arrival for either one of them. Who's this? George. And this is John. Arrival. Here's the little symbol for arrival. 12 per hour. 12 per hour. Now here's our little symbol, for our service rate. Help me out with George. How are we going to calculate a service rate? It takes 4 minutes. You got to think about an hour. If a customer was showing up one after another for 4 minutes, how many customers could be helped in 60 minutes? 4 minutes went by, another 4 minutes went by, another 4 minutes. How many instead of how long? How many? 60 minutes divided by 4 minutes. Help me out. How many?
15.
15. We have a rate of 15. John, though, is 3 minutes. Every 3 minutes, someone's coming up and he can help them one after another in the same 60-minute period. His rate would be how many customers? 20 per hour. Very good. 60 minutes divided by 4, 60 minutes divided by 3 minutes. There's the difference between them. They both are going to have a waiting cost, cost W, of $10 per hour. Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah.
That up a minute ago. And then our what's our cost? Our cost per channel. Cost. This is cost per channel. I can't remember the little letter here for per channel. I'll just put CH. George is how much? $8 an hour, which is crazy. Yeah. John is $12 an hour. You put that. And that's all the information we need to know to figure out which one to hire. Because we're going to base our decision on the economic analysis. What's best for the company? They both could do the job, but do we go to spend the extra money, or do we spend the least amount of money, and the rate doesn't matter? It's all based on that holding cost and the rate it would cost us and the rate of providing service. So now, here, if this is a quiz question, you're looking at these four, and remember, it will only be one of these four. First of all, how many channels does this waiting line system have? No.
One.
Yes. Only one's working at a time. They're not both working at the same time. So that's why you got to look at it as a one channel. If they were both working at the same time, this would definitely be a two. And if it were a two, that would lead you right to one of these, because there's only one of them that are for multi-channel, right? There's only one of them. But this is a single channel. My question for you is there a standard deviation involved? No. So we now just canceled out another one. We're down to two of these that it could be. Is the service rate for every customer that walks up to get tools the exact same amount of time no matter what? No. We just canceled out another one. That leaves us with one of these, only one of the four that this could be, that we need to look at the formula so we can figure out our total economic analysis cost per hour. Which one is it? The top one. Exponential single channel. Page 512. The reason I'm really emphasizing these pages is because rely on these pages, for this is the only chapter where the PowerPoint is just too vague. Go with these pages, because it's all about making sure you pick the right formula. So now I go to page 512. I got it right there. And I look at my formulas and I say, hey, for me to do the economic analysis, if I recall, it's the cost per channel times K, which is the number of channels. And as we evaluate each of these, the number of channels for either one of them is going to be how many? Is this a single channel or multi-channel? Single channel, so only one's working at a time. So what will K be? One. When we calculate one of them, that's going to be $8, but for the other, it's going to be $12 times 1. There's our cost per channel. This is George. This is John, right? Mm-hmm. The other part of the formula says you add to this, it's the waiting cost times something right there that everybody gets confused. That's something right there. This is the part where you got to do the work to get that so this decision could be made. But the only way to get that, what is this in words? Average what? Oh, come on. Yes. Average number of units in the system, which is represented by which variable? I heard it. L. There it is. Not L sub Q. Not W sub Q. Not W. L. That's what you're looking for, no matter where it is. And remember, you're looking at these in a certain order. They won't always be in this order. So don't rely, oh, it's the third one down or something like that. L, average number in the system. And your instincts are going to say, oh, average number waiting, because it's a waiting cost. No. It's the average number in the system, not the average number of units waiting. So we go to this formula. Do I have it up on the screen? And I've got to get to this, average number of units in the system. But it uses this. So I've got to do this first to get to that. And this is the formula. If this were arbitrary, this would not be the same formula. So that's why you've got to make sure you're picking the right method first, with the way I showed you how to narrow it down. So here we go. It says take arrival rate, square it, over service rate times service minus arrival. Let's do George first. So I got 12 squared, I think. That's arrival for either of them, actually. 12 squared for both of them. What's different is our denominator. Service rate here is 15 times 15 minus 12. And over here is 20 times 20 minus 12. Calculators, get started on that. 12 times 12 is 144. So we got our numerators for each one. And then 15 minus 12 is 3. 3 times 15, 45. I just need 144 divided by 45 there. 20 minus 12 is 8. 8 times 20 is 160. Does that sound right? 144 divided by 160. Give me 144 divided by 45 first. 3 point what? 3.2? 3.2? Just making sure. 3.2. And what is 144 divided by 160? Point? 0.5? Point what? 9? Thank you. 0.9. Now, that gave us L sub Q, average number of units weighting. That's not what we need. We got to go one more step. Take the average number of units weighting, add to it the ratio of your arrivals divided by service. So I'm taking 3.2, and I'm going to add to it my arrivals, which is 12, over my service, which is 15. Over here, I'm going to take 0.9 and add to it my arrivals 12, my service here is over 20. What is 12 divided by 15? 0.8? Anybody? Help me out. 12 divided by 15 is 0.8. So I got 3.2 plus 0.8 equals 4. Average number in the system for George would be 4. I'm going over here to John, I think. I can't remember already. 12 divided by 20, is that 0.6 maybe? Yes. 0.6? So I have 0.9 plus 0.6 equals 1.5 average number in the system for John. So I'm going over here to my economic analysis, and I'm saying the cost of waiting for each of them is going to be $10, I believe. Is that right? Yeah. $10, $10, but for George, I multiply the $10 by 4. And for John, I think is his name, I multiply times 1.5. So over here, I've got 4 times 10 is 40. 1 times 8 is 8. 40 plus 8 equals $48 per hour, because arrivals were per hour, service was per hour, our holding cost was per hour, and our cost per channel were per hour. So that's the overall operation cost if we hire George per hour. I'm going down to Joe or John, and I got 1.5 times 10, which makes 15, plus 12. 15 plus 12 is 27. Is that correct? Is that correct? Thank you. Per hour, oh my God. There's hardly any decision to be made here. It seems unbelievably obvious. We need to hire who? John. But John's going to cost us more money. And most managers go, oh no, I'm going to save money here. I get a bonus if I don't spend my whole budget. I'm hiring George. What's best in the big picture is to hire John. Even though John's going to cost us almost twice as much money, because he's just that 1 minute faster of helping our employees get what they need from the tool bin, ends up saving us a significant amount of money in the big picture. $27 per hour overall cost with waiting and taking into consideration compared to 48. That's what you've got to get to be ready for this next quiz. Just like that. You've got to be able to recognize which formula to use, get to the L, get the economic analysis so you can make your recommendation. And that's part of the question you're going to have in front of you is, who should you recommend we should hire based on economic analysis? Go ahead. You've got your question?
Yeah,
Or she answered it?
yeah.
Okay. You want me to add to it?
No.
Okay.
I was just thinking about it.
All right. You ready? Let's keep going. I forgot what slide I'm going through here. I don't even have a part.
I have a question.
I'm ready. Sounds like Joanne.
All right, the question, how do you know it was just one line? Does it say one line?
Oh, from the words of the question. You got to picture the scenario. 2 men have applied for the position of distributing parts. George is fresh out of trade school and he accepted it. See, we're only hiring one person, but we have 2 applicants. Only one of them getting hired. There's no way we're hiring both. If it said we're hiring both to work it together, that would make it multi-channel. But 2 men applied for the position for distributing parts to the workmen. George is fresh out of trade school. His average time. John is expects more. Let me think. Workman's time, figure and weight, work override. Which applicant should be hired? See, it's kind of tough, but it's not.
In my head, it was two positions.
It kind of doesn't read that way. You kind of got to visualize what's going on here. The key to this is that two men have applied for the position, meaning there's only one per job available, there's only one person doing it. But you do have something just like this in your future where should we have 2 of them doing it or 3 of them doing it? Everybody hear that? So you're deciding between one multi-channel compared to another multi-channel, but one has 2 doing it at the same time, one has 3 doing it at the same time, and because of that, you're going to have to calculate 2 different L's and get the economic analysis based on K being a 2 and K being a 3. But you just can't change K. Once K is a 2, it has a different L than if K is a 3. So you got to calculate L for both scenarios. If I were to say, hey, should we have 2 people doing this job or 3 people doing this job? There's going to be 2 different L's there. And you're going to find that per unit of time cost for both scenarios, 2 or 3, and give you your recommendation. There should be 2 of them doing it. No, there should be 3 of them because of this analysis. This is a great tool to use when you're making hiring decisions. Because the instincts of most managers is to want to save money and hire the lesser expensive employee, that opportunity. And in this case, we come out ahead hiring the more expensive one, and that's not unusual. And when you're, and if you do this with multi-channels, like you're managing a call center, and you're trying to get some more money so you can add another person to the call center, and you do the economic analysis and show, look, I have 3 people in the call center now. If you could just give me the budget to get a 4th person, because of this waiting cost, let me show you how much we'll save. You do something like this, you're getting your budget increased, and you're getting the 4th person. If you can present this and show, look how much we'll save because of the waiting cost. As long as whoever's in charge of that budget over your division that you're managing understands where this waiting cost came from, and you show them how you got this average number in the system, and what it would cost to just bring on 1 more person, going from 3 to 4, and if it ends up saving the company money, that's how you get your budget increase to bring on another person. That's how it's done. If they can see the big picture of how much it would save. If you calculate out, though, it won't save money, and you just hurt yourself. There's no way you're getting the money unless you figure out another way to justify it. So that's how it's used. All right. So now, we're going back here. We're going to look at an example of constant service, as soon as I can find it. Come on. There we go. Mechanical pony ride is at the entrance of the very popular J-Mart store, and it provides a 2-minute ride for 50 cents. Now, the reason this is constant, Joanne, this is another one where you look at this and go, well, wait a minute, it's not telling me about the service, it just tells me 2 minutes for a ride. That's the service time. You almost got to read into it and go, okay, this horse is mechanical, so it's probably providing a 2-minute ride no matter what for every single kid, because there's not a human involved. That's the key, really, to understanding that it's constant when there's no human involved. It's the human that makes things not constant. So this mechanical pony gives a 2-minute ride, and you know, I kind of want to give hints. So if this were a quiz question, it may say gives exactly a 2-minute ride. I may add the word exactly, just so you realize it's constant. It's with the same for every child that goes up to that pony and puts the 50 cents in. Gives a 2-minute ride for 50 cents. Children wanting to ride the pony arrives, accompanied of course by an adult, at 15 per hour. Arrival, 15, service, I already forgot, 2 minutes. 2 minutes. If a kid is walking up to that pony and jumping on as another one's getting off, and we're helping one child after another ride the pony every 2 minutes with no breaks between them, an hour goes by, how many kids got to ride? 30. 60 minutes divided by 2 minutes for each one is a rate of 30 per arrivals, 15 per hour, service 30 per hour. Let me look into it a little more here. I'm just staring at it. Now I'm going to look over here. The reason I know, in order to pick one of those 4, is first of all, this is obviously a single channel, so that takes exponential multi-channel out of the picture. But the key to it obviously is where you say, oh, this is providing a 2-minute ride to every single child, and it's always 2 minutes, and it doesn't vary from 2 minutes. There's no standard deviation, so you know it's not arbitrary. This has to be constant. And that's then where you go, page 527. Now, I want to point out what's happening here on 527 and 526. Let me see if I can zoom out. I'm zooming out as far as I can go. Right here on 526, this is all your formulas for arbitrary. 527 says if you happen to recognize this problem is constant service, the only formula that you got to do differently than arbitrary is that one formula, the average number of units waiting. Other than that, you go back to the previous page and use every other formula the exact same as arbitrary. Nothing's different but one formula between constant and arbitrary. And that's why you kind of use them both pages here. Right? So once you recognize it's constant, you're saying, okay, here's my formulas for probability no units in the system. But if you don't use this one, you'll jump over there, get the average number of waiting, bring that number back, and start using this formula now, average number of the system. There's my L. I can now do my economic analysis. If I were asking a question that's the probability of a arriving unit having to wait, you're going to have to keep going to get to here. Well, really, it's just arrival divided by service. And then if you subtract it from 1, it's the average number of the probability of no one there at all, and the pony gets to be idle. All right, so when you recognize constant, again, it's every formula for arbitrary except for that average number waiting. So we go here, we go, anyway, let's go back to PowerPoint. Just want to make sure you saw that. First question says, what fraction of the time is the pony idle? That means the probability of no units in the system at all, that the pony can just relax, if it can. And that would be 1 minus whatever the utilization factor is. Arrivals are at 15 rate. Service is at 30 per hour rate, so 15 divided by 30. We just calculated the probability of a child having to wait. 50% chance. When we subtract it from 1, now we have the probability that the pony is not doing anything, that there's no child there to even ride it. It's just a coincidence that they're both 50%. That's all that is. Arrival divided by service, on constant and arbitrary, by the way, is the probability that a unit will have to wait, that a service, the customer would have to wait. And then 1 minus that utilization is the probability that no one's there to utilize it, and the pony or the employee or whatever it is can twiddle their thumbs. So there's that. That part's easy. Now, what's the average number of children waiting? I want to point out that sometimes a couple of these formulas are slightly different than what you see on these pages, but they happen to get you the exact same answer. There's more than one way to solve this. Personally, I like the formulas on the pages better than the ones on the PowerPoint, personally. But it gets you to the exact same correct answer. For example, this one right here is slightly different than you have here on page 527, but it gets the same, gets you to the exact same answer. So we take our arrival, 15 squared, 2 times our service rate of 30 times our service rate minus our arrival, which is 15 times 60, divided into what, 15 squared, 0.25. The average number of units having to wait is about 1/4 of a child. We take that number and then we calculate the average number in the system. Well, we didn't calculate because we're not being asked the average number in the system. If this were economic analysis, we would take this and add it to arrivals divided by service. Let's do it. I want to do that. 0.25 is our L sub Q. I want to get L, average number in the system, equals 0.25, whoops, not equals, plus our arrivals divided by our service, which is 0.5. The average number in the system, which is L, and if we had to do an economic analysis, this would be the number to use, is about 0.75. 3/4 of a child is the average amount in the system. Because they're arriving so much fewer than what the horse can handle, the pony can handle. So that's why it's only 3/4 of a child. Then it says, what's the average time a child waits for a ride? Now, there's a couple students that weren't here 2 days ago, so I'm going to really highlight what this time is. The two time ones are the hardest ones because you got to convert the calculation to minutes because you're being given the proportion of time of whatever units the arrival and service rate are based on. Per hour, so these two time calculations are per hour. We take arrivals divided by, this is our average time a child waits for a ride. Our arrival divided by 2 times the service over service minus arrival. If you notice, it's very similar, except you're squaring it up there. 0.01667. What does that mean? Of an hour. Multiply it times 60 minutes because odds are on the quiz it's going to say, what is the average time a child has to wait for a ride in minutes? But your arrivals were in hours, your service was in hours, and so it's going to give you an answer proportion of an hour. And you multiply that times 60 minutes to break it down to minutes. So 60 minutes times 0.01667 hours is 1 minute. The average time a child waits for a ride when it gets busy or whatever, on average, is about 1 minute. Arbitrary. Any questions on constant? I mean, it was kind of fast. This is all, I hope it's starting to seem easy a little bit. You know, I want to make sure you're getting this. Let's do average time a unit spends in the system. We did WQ. Average time a child spends waiting 1 minute. Average time a unit spends in the system. All right? Take our 1 minute or our 0.066, what was it? I don't even remember. I gotta go back. Thank you. 1667, is that what I just heard? And then you take that and add it to 1 over, is it arrival or service? Service. Gotta look at the variable. It's the service, which is 30. 1 over 30, now I need a calculator. 1 divided by 30, oh, you can't even see what we're doing. 1 divided by 30 equals, and now I'm adding that to 0.01667, okay? 0.05. 0.05 what? 0.05 what is the average, I forgot what we're calculating, average time a unit spends, a child spends in the system. 0.05 what? Hours. It will say, what's the average time a child spends in the system in minutes? Multiply that times 60 minutes, 0.05 times 60, it should be about 3 minutes. In the system is not just riding the pony, maybe because there's a little bit of time of waiting. And that's why it's being added to the waiting time, which was 1 minute, plus the time on the pony was 2 minutes. And because it's constant, that's why this is so obvious. When it's arbitrary or exponential, you don't rely on what I just said. It won't be so obvious. But in this case, it's always 2 minutes for a child on the pony. So you'd add that to the average time that a child has to wait to get on the pony. All right, that's it for constant. We're going to arbitrary. I'm trying to make this seem easy. Is it working at all? A little bit? Nobody's shaking their head yet. You know this is being recorded. Okay, let's do it. Arbitrary. Single server. Single channel. Don't get me wrong, there's multiple channels and stuff, and you may get into these other ones in the other classes, but I think 4 of these, just to introduce you to how these are used, these are the 4 most common, more or less. What's the one thing you're going to look for to make sure you know that you're about to use the arbitrary formula on a story? Very good, standard deviation. That's the answer to that. The easiest answer you can look for to know whether you should be using arbitrary or not. If you're not given the standard deviation, then it can't be arbitrary. You've got to have it. All right, Cutler University Student Union has 1 self-service copy machine. On the average, 12 customers per hour arrive to make copies. There's my 12 per hour. There's my arrival. The arrival process follows Poisson distribution. The time to copy documents follows approximately a normal distribution with a mean of 2.5 minutes, 2.5 minutes, and a standard deviation, 30 seconds. The reason I said is when you have your standard deviation in a different form of unit of time than your arrivals and your service, you got to do a conversion. You cannot have different units of time, so I know what's coming. 30 seconds. Just for the sake, 30 seconds is the same as how many minutes? 0.5 minutes, just in case. What if we got to convert it to hours? 30 seconds would be how many hours? How do I do this? 30, how many seconds in an hour? 60 times 60 would be an hour of seconds, right? So let me take 60 times 60 is how many seconds in an hour? And this is 30 seconds, so 30 divided by 3600 would give me how many hours? In case the standard deviation has to be changed to hours, 0.008, 0.0083333 hours. We're just getting prepared. I don't know if we got to go to minutes or hours, but you got to be consistent with that standard deviation. If your arrivals in hour, your standard deviation has to be an hour. If your arrivals are going to be per 15 minutes or something, it's standard deviation is per 15 minutes. It's equivalent to it. All right. The union, I can't even see this. The union manager has received several complaints that from students regarding the long lines at the copier. Based on the information, determine 1, the average number of customers waiting or using the copier. 2, the probability of arriving customer must wait in line. 3, the proportions of time the copier is idle. And 4, the average time the customer must wait in line before using the copier. So we have 4 of them there. What page should we go to?
526.
526. The only one that's going to be using the arbitrary. Here we go. Arrivals, 12 per hour. Service is what is it, 2.5 minutes? 2.5 minutes. So 1 customer gets served every 2.5 minutes. To turn into a rate, take 1 over 2.5 minutes, and you'll get 0.4 per minute. Look at this, we're going per minute. So our arrival is 0.4 per minute. Just for the fun of it, let's think about this. If it takes 2.5 minutes for every customer, and there's 60 minutes in an hour, how many would that be per hour? So what we take, 60 minutes divided by 2.5 for each one of them? 60 divided by 2.5 would be about 24. So this is also 24 per hour. 12 per hour, just in case we're using minutes, would be the same as how many per minute. How much time does it take? If you can do 12 per hour, how much time does it take for each one to arrive? I can't hear you. 5 minutes, is that right? 5 plus 5, is that equals 60 divided by 5 minutes, 12? Or really, I'll take 60 divided by 12 and confirm what he said. At 5 minutes. So 1 over 5 would be how many per minute. Because it takes 5 minutes on average for each arrival. So 1 divided by 5 minutes, 0.2. So our arrivals are 0.2 per minute, or 12 per hour. Our service is 0.4 per minute, or 24 per hour. If we're using hours, our standard deviation has to be per hour. If we're using minutes, our standard deviation has to be in minutes. And that's probably why this is being converted to minutes, to use standard deviation in minutes. And here's your conversion. If we decide, now I want to do it both ways because I can see some frustrations. I'm going to do it both ways, but we got to make sure to use the standard deviation in minutes when we're using minutes, in hours when we're using hours. This is the point. Standard deviation's unit of time has to be the same of whatever unit of time your arrivals and your service are going to be rated as rates. Per hour, per minute, per half hour, per quarter hour, whatever it is, which would be minutes also. So we got per minute, or per hour, per hour. We're going to get the same answer whichever one we use. Next. Here's the different formula you're going to use for arbitration. It's the only one that has the standard deviation within the formula. This is on 526, that second formula down. And I can't tell you how many people won't recognize a problem as being arbitrary and will use the exponential average number of customers waiting formula instead of this one. And you'll get an answer that's a little close, but in no way is the right answer. So it's the arrival squared times the standard deviation squared. You add to it arrivals divided by standard deviation squared. There's your numerator. Denominator, 1 minus the proportion of arrivals over service rate times 2. Now look at the arrival over service rate just by itself. If we use per hour, it'd be 12 over 24. What's the rate there? What's the proportion there? 12 over 24. 0.5. What if we use minutes? 0.2 over 0.4. What's the proportion there? 0.5. Whether you use per hour or per minute, you're going to get the same answer, as long as everything's in the same unit of time. Everybody hear that? So we're using per minute here. 0.2 squared. Standard deviation has been put into minutes instead of seconds, which is a half a minute. 0.5 squared. 0.2 over 0.4, which is the 0.5 proportion we were just talking about, squared. And then you add the left and right hand side. 1 minus the 0.2 over 0.4, which is 0.5. 1 minus 0.5 times 2. You end up getting 0.76 customers. The average number of customers waiting is a little more, just slightly over 3/4 of the customers on average waiting to use the copier. No, I'm sorry, that's the average number in the system. Where is our average number waiting? 1/4 of a person on average is waiting. Then we added that to the proportion again to get the average number of customers in the system. Now we can use that and say, what if we add a second copier? What would be our cost per hour or minute to have a second copier? We could determine whether having 2 copiers versus 1 copier would have a different outcome, but you could use this economically for economic analysis. Probability of arriving customer must wait in line. Well, that would be the proportion of arrivals over service. Whether we use hourly or per minute, you get the same answer. 0.2 over 0.4 is 0.5. 12 over 24 would be 0.5. The average number, the proportion of time that the copier's idle and no one's there using it would be 1 minus the proportion. So 1 minus 0.5, 50% of the time that copier's doing nothing. 50% of the time the customer's walking up and having to wait. So we got a 50-50 going. The average time a customer has to wait. We have our LQ from the previous slide, which was about 1/4 of a student on average having to wait, divided by our arrival rate, which is 0.2, makes 1.3. Now, why is this in minutes? Because we used our arrival and service per minute. So that's per minute. If this were all done with 12 and 24, this would calculate, it'd still be 1.3 minutes, whatever the proportion of an hour 1.3 minutes represents. So it'd be like point something something of an hour. And then when you multiply it times 60 minutes, you would end up getting 1.3 minutes. So they say the same thing, but they're just in different units of time. So on average, a customer walking up, a student walking up in our union to use that copier, on average has to wait about 1.3 minutes, which doesn't seem like a lot. Is that it? That's all 4? How are we doing on time? You ready? We're doing this now. What's this? Oh, yeah, let's take a look. Go to waiting line. We just talked about the copy machine. Which one of our waiting line methods should we choose on the copy machine story? Which one's the copy machine? Now be careful, because there's 2 choices that could jump out at you on this. Everybody hear it? Josh said, arbitrary service 1 channel. I can't tell you how many people would accidentally pick this one. Arbitrary no waiting. It's this one. Arbitrary 1 channel, because we were given the standard deviation on that one. Hey, I forgot. Our arrival rate. Now be careful, because your standard deviation, if we decide right now to do hours, we got to make sure our standard deviation's in hours, which we did convert it. Matter of fact, if we go fast, we can do both of these and show you how you get the same answer. Let's do per minute, just like the PowerPoint. Arrivals per minute, we're at 0.2, correct? Service per minute was 0.4 per minute. The copy machine can help on average. Standard deviation has to be in per minute, which is a half a minute, because it's 30 seconds. 0.5. Forget the economic analysis, we're just getting everything else right now. 50% chance that copy machine's doing nothing, just like we calculate. 50% chance that a student's going to have to wait when they walk up. Average time a unit spends in the waiting line is 1.3. 1.3 what? Arrivals are per minute, services per minute, so that's 1.3 minutes. Let's do per hour now, so you can see the difference. Don't forget this, 0.5, 0.5, 1.3. We go edit. We're now putting arrivals per hour of 12. Service per hour is 24. Standard deviation has to be in hours. We got 0.00833 hours is the same as 30 seconds, right? So I'm going to put, forget over, 0.008, how many threes I can fit? How's that? Here we go. What should be the probability that someone walks up and has to wait? 50%. What's the probability that that copy machine doing nothing, just idle? 50%. Now here's the tough part. What's the average time a student has to wait? It was 1.3 minutes, but now it's going to be in hours. 50% chance, no units in the system, meaning the copy machine is sitting there idle. 50% chance of an arriving unit, a student having to wait when they walk up to the copy machine. But the average time is 0.0217 hours. So I take 0.0217 hours times 60 minutes in an hour, and I should get 1.3. 1.3 minutes is the average time. So it doesn't matter. One of you could use per hour on this problem on a quiz, and one of you could use per minutes, and someone may want to use per second if you want, which is fine. And you're all going to get the same answer if you did it correctly. And you can anybody can do it any way they want, whatever you feel comfortable. You okay? One more thing, and I'm thinking about posting this. You tell me if you think you'd find it handy. Let's see. This is this looks like a single channel exponential arrival. Oh, constant. Okay. What was our arrival on the horse? 15 per hour and 30 per hour is probably why I got the numbers next to there. Look what I did here for constant. 1 minus G8 over G9, which is the formula for the probability of the horse not doing anything, that no one's there. This one, there it is, G8 divided by G9 squared, divided by 2 times 1 minus G8 G9, which will give us then the average number of children waiting. We take the cell above, we add it to the proportion of arrival over service to get the average number in the system of children for that horse, and so on, right here. Now, most likely on the quiz it's going to say, manually show me your work to calculate the average number of children in the system. But you can have this open to check your answer. You know, and you can use this, and if for some reason I didn't put manually show me the work, you can literally hand this in even. But I'll probably put manually show me the work. All right? So now, here we go. I want to refresh my mind what the answers were for that constant. Let's go back up there real quick. The horse, it was a 50% idle, 50% being used, right? And about a quarter of a child, and whatever that is, 1 minute. So now let's go to this. Excel, 15, 30 service rate, 50% that the horse is idle, 50% utilization. Here's our average time waiting, 0.01667, just like the PowerPoint, 0.01667. And there's the average number of children waiting, 0.25, which is just like the PowerPoint, 0.25. So these are pretty easy to set up in Excel. Should I post this Excel spreadsheet? I see a lot of yeses.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll try to remember tonight. If for any reason I forget to post this tonight, please email me and refresh my memory to post this.
Do you do one for each of the board?
I have another one. The formula to do this, you've got to use that table on multi-channel. Everybody remember the table we used 2 days ago? Because K is a sum of and it changes, you've got to have at least that first one done using that table, and then the rest of it, you'll have to plug in what the P sub O is, though, if you use multi-channel. This one's easy to put on Excel, that one and that one, but this one's not so easy. That'd be way too much work. Let me see what this one is. This one looks like it's single channel. This looks like it's exponential service, single channel. So, let's see it. This may be based on, it says slide 23. Whoop. Which one is that? Slide 23, I hear something. Is it single channel? Single channel exponential? It is the first one, isn't it? Okay, the first one again was the trader, the stock trader working. Calls are coming in at 20 per hour, so there's our arrival rate. He helps customers every 2 minutes, so he has the ability to help 30 customers in an hour. 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, for 60 minutes would be 30 customers, right? So we have arrival at 20 per hour. We have service at 30 per hour, because he handles them every 2 minutes. My question for you is, what's the average time of calling customers in the system? Everybody hear what I'm asking for? In minutes. Are you ready? How are we doing on time? We're doing perfect. We got an in-class assignment. Did I mention that?
No.
What? Really?
It's
You
on
didn't like them?
Blackboard.
I swear, I really thought you liked them. I did. Not on this chapter. What do you mean? I thought these are grade boosters, these in-class assignments. Aren't they grade boosters?
Yes.
What? No. What are you talking about? You ready? I want you to tell me. Oh, look, you guys are jumping ahead in the PowerPoints. I didn't see that coming. Darn it. Shoot. Let's keep going. Well, where's my Excel? 20 per hour. 30 per hour. You ready? Average time a phone call is in the system in minutes. What number are you going to use? W, WQ, L, what?
WQ.
Now, WQ would be the average amount of time a phone call is waiting. W would be the average time a phone call is in the system. And there it is, 0.1. But what is that? 0.1, what's the unit right here? Hours. How do I convert it to minutes? Multiply times 60 minutes. 0.1 in 60 minutes equals 6 minutes is the average time a call spends in the system, waiting and being helped all together. This is what you might expect right here. You may even be given all of these, and then the question says, what's the average time? You know, there'll be the little story. These are phone calls coming in for a stock trader. The calls are coming in at 20 per hour, and the stock trader is able to help each one of them for 2 minutes. Here's the results for the waiting line theory. What's the average time a phone call spends in the system? And then you got to look at this and be able to recognize that you're looking for that number, and then multiply it times 60 minutes, because you got to realize that that is per hour. And then you show your work. You say 6 minutes. I'm starting to get the feeling you're finding this harder than I'm trying to make it.
Okay, so we have a question about the arbitrary problem.
Okay.
You did 1 over 2.5. What was the reasoning for doing that?
Let me look and figure it out. It's probably because it's a slightly different formula than what you have in the book. Is that what you're looking at, possibly?
Like, okay, when you're trying to convert it to hours, you do 60 divided by how many, like, how long it takes. So it takes 1 minute to do 60 divided by 4.
Oh, this.
It takes 1 minute. Or
Right.
if you're converting it to minutes.
This is, we're trying to find the rate per minute. We were given how much time it would take. You could convert this to what the service rate would be per hour. That's a lot easier. Because if you're helping a customer every 2.5 minutes, you just got to imagine, 2.5 minutes, 2.5 minutes. How many would I get to before I get to 60 minutes?
Right.
2.5, 2.5, 2.5. So 60 divided by 2.5 would be 12 per hour, or is that 24? 24 per hour. But because we were going to use per minute, if you just take one over the amount of time it takes to help one customer, you know you can't help one customer in 1 minute because it takes 2.5 minutes. So you know it's going to be a portion of customer. Because if it takes 2.5 minutes to help one customer, how many can you help in 1 minute? Less than a customer. So one customer per 2.5 minutes is the same as 0.4 every minute. Every minute goes by, we help 4/10 of a customer. But it takes 2.5 to help a whole customer.
Got it.
Just to get a rate. Remember, anytime you're given time as the arrival or service, and it could be time for either one of them, you must convert it to some kind of rate, per hour, per minute. It's all about how many instead of how long. That's the way I recognize it. If it's giving you how long it takes, you need to make sure you get it to how many per something. Convert to a rate. All right, let's get to the end class. We got 18 or 15, 16, 17, 18 minutes. It's not going to take 18 minutes. Any other discussions, sir?
Yeah, you do a multi-channel.
Multi-channel. Let me go back to the example. Here's the, is this multi-channel right here? All right, we'll try to get this in 3 minutes, and then we'll go to our in class. The firm is going to do a advertising. Where are we? Is this it?
Something about the 30/30 K2.
Yeah, right here. This is it. The company for that stock trade, the market maker, phone line busy. Oh, not on the right spot. Hang on. There we go. They decide to do an advertising blitz, which they believe is going to increase their business by 50%. They realize that Joe, I think, can't handle it by himself. Is it Joe? And we're going to hire somebody. We just hired someone. His name's Fred to help Joe. Multi-channel, because more than one's taking care of customers now. So we want to figure out the scenario for multi-channel. And if we go to multi-channel page, help me out. What page is multi-channel? 517. 517. The very first probability for multi-channel at page 517, I don't want you to spend all day doing this. You will never finish your quiz or final exam or whatever. So instead, we're going to use the table. And the table says, whatever the arrival rate is, divided by the service rate per one channel, not the combined service rate, per one channel. The customers, the phone calls are coming in, they were coming in at 20 per hour, but they think the advertising blitz is going to increase it by 50%. So 50% of 20 is 10. We're going to add 10 to it. That's going to be 30 per hour is our arrival rate. And then it says, Fred can handle calls every 2 minutes, and Joe can handle calls every 2 minutes. We only want to look at one, what their rate is. We're given in time, 2 minutes. So if either Joe or Fred were helping one customer after another for a whole hour, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, how many customers could they help? 60 minutes divided by 2 minutes for each one is 30 per hour. 30 arrival, 30 service. We divide that, and then we go to the chart. 30 divided by 30 is 1. We go to the table. In this first column, it's that ratio you look for. There's 1. Now, how many channels are you trying to find the probability of the system being idle where they can twiddle their thumbs? We just hired one other person, which is Fred. I can't see here. Is that straight across? So there's about a 33% chance that both of them will have nothing to do, even though we have this increase in calls. But there's no way that Joe can handle it by himself. We had to hire Fred. Even though now we have 1/3, 33%. Once you have that number, right, you go back to these formulas, you put that 0.333 in for right there, and everything else is just using the arrival rate and the service rate. 30 divided by 30 to the exponent of k, number of channels, how many are taking calls? 2 times arrival times service, 30 times 30. 2 of them taking calls minus 1, factorial, 2 minus 1 is 1 factorial, which equals 1. What's 0 factorial? I know I did this 2 days ago.
1.
1, that's the only weird one. All right. times K, which is 2, service minus arrival, which is 30 minus 30. Oh, you multiply first, then subtract, so you don't get a 0. 2 times 30 minus 30 gets you back to 30. Square it. Divide, then multiply times what you just found on the table, 0.333. You got that. Get L, take what you just calculated, plus 30 over 30, which is a 1. You have that. Economic analysis. In that case, it cost us $20 an hour for each of the guys to take the calls. There's 2 channels, because there's 2 of them taking the calls. I don't remember the waiting cost. Throw me a number. $15 an hour for waiting. And our L, the average number in the system, let's see if it's on the PowerPoint. L is for Thurs, 1.25? No, 1.333? 1.333. There's our total cost for having 2 of them there. How's that? You're ready. Work in groups, don't work alone. Whoops. Let me see the whole thing. Work in groups, don't work alone. You look at this and you think it's hard and going to take a long time, then you're misinterpreting it. This is almost so easy that once you figure it out, it's going to take you a matter of just 4 or 5 minutes. That's it. It's a very simple, small calculation, not some huge thing. I'm literally giving you all the information you need. You just have to pinpoint the information you need. Don't say you're wrong. Did you just say that?
I said it.
Oh.
We're down a person in the front.